This is a frequently asked question from my high net worth clients from a mortgage broker with 15 years of experience. And the question is, if you hypothetically have $1 million of cash in your bank account and the property you want to purchase is $1.5 million, would you, option A would be borrow just $500,000 home loan plus your $1 million cash to make the purchase of $1.5 million? Or would you B, borrow maximum from the bank, which is about $1.2 million, which is 80%, and only add in $375,000 of your $1 million cash to make the purchase? Let's go behind the scenes and look at the pros and cons of each. Now, just to set the premise of this video, this is not financial advice. This is just my own humble opinion, and the primary purchase of these properties is under investment purposes and not own occupy. And with that said, let's look at option A, which is to use all your cash and borrow just a minimal amount just to cover this purchase. And for simplicity of math, I'm not going to chuck in, government costs, stamp duty, solicitor fees, yada. Just keep it as the loan amount and the cash to purchase at $1.5 million. Okay? So option A, the pros of buying with $1 million cash and just borrowing $500K, well, obviously, as an investment purchase, you can switch between P&I and interest only. So with the low LVR, which stands for loan to value ratio, which is basically the percentage of the loan against the property. So it works out to be 33% of the property value of $1.5 million. And therefore, with such a low LVR, usually anything under 60%, will attract a lower rate. So for P&I, you'll get 5.6%. The repayment will look like $2,870.39 per month for a $500K home loan. And at interest only, you just add it probably on average at 0.3, 5.9 interest only. It works out to be $2,333.33 per month. So the obvious pros at the moment is low repayment and manageable repayment for your lifestyle. Now let's look at the cons. Now the obvious cons in this structure is that you lost $1 million of your own cash to make this purchase because you opted to borrow the least amount from the bank, which is $500K. So on face value at the moment, your cash savings will be zero after you put down the $1 million towards this purchase. And then another con is that you might say, hey, well, I put in $1 million towards this purchase. I can pull that out anytime I want, right? No, because when you try to pull out the extra equity of $1 million back out, the bank will require another assessment on your financial situation. And say, for example, in 6 to 12 months' time, your situation actually goes downhill and you went back to the bank to say, hey, I put in an extra $1 million equity, can I pull that back out? The bank will say, F-U-C-K. F off, mate, you don't service, come back later. And you're like, I shouldn't have done that, right? Another cons is negative gearing benefits. For example, my high net worth clients who have the ability to have $1 million in their bank account obviously earn a lot of money. So if you borrow a minimum of the loan amount of $500K and your interest is this much, then what it means is times 12, your interest expense is around $27K. But for example, the rent that's going into this property is about $1,200 a week. That is $62,000 of rental income. Therefore, that minus that, you're actually positive cash flow. And that might be against your strategy of doing negative gearing to reduce your tax. And that's when you need to consciously decide whether negative gearing, which is a way to reduce your tax payable due to your income bracket, is better than positive gearing, which is you're getting income on top of all your repayments, but then because you're on a higher tax bracket, that extra income tops you to a higher threshold of tax, which means you're actually worse off getting income on a positive level because you're paying more tax to the ATO. This is where option B comes into play. For example, you borrow a maximum amount from the bank, 80% from the bank, that's $1.2 million, and you put the least amount of cash, which includes the deposit for 20% to avoid mortgage insurance plus stamp duty, to make the $1.5 million purchase. Which means the LVR is 80%, which is calculated from dividing $1.2 million to $1.5 million market value to get this LVR. And because the LVR is higher than this LVR, the rate is a little bit higher. So 6.4% at P&I, the repayment is $7,506 per month, or interest only at 0.3 on average will be interest only at $6,700 per month. At this point, a lot of you will be thinking, hey, option B is actually worse than option A, Q, because at the moment, the LVR is higher at 80%, the interest rate is higher, and the repayment is higher. So definitely, this is one of the cons. But let's look at the pros. One of the obvious pro is basically having your cash left. For example, you borrowed $1.2 million over here. You put down $375,000 to avoid mortgage insurance and pay the stamp duty out of your $1 million. You're still left with $625,000 cash. At this point, if you selected, which I will select obviously for my preference, interest only, you'll have a lot of $1.2 million. You'll obviously have a offset account. You can park this money into the offset account to offset the interest. So at the end of the day, your final net loan is only $575,000, which means the repayment will be $3,210 per month, interest only. So right now, the obvious pro is now you have access to the $625,000 cash that is sitting in an offset account. And once this money sits in your offset account, and for example, tomorrow you were to fall sick, can't work for the next 12 months, doesn't matter, you can still access the $625K. Whilst for this scenario in option A, you already put down $1 million towards this purchase because you only borrowed $500K. You went to the bank, next day you lost your job and go, hey, give me back the $1 million. The bank will say, F you. So by having this structure, yes, a little bit more expensive, but you have access to this, which I obviously talk about on my Amazon best-selling book, which is called the CPR method, which is the Crisis Protection Repayment Method. Depending on your situation, if you're a high net worth client paying a lot of tax, you can now control your tax deduction in terms of negative gearing. For example, now you have a limit of $1.2 million. Yes, you have $625K parked, which means your net balance is $575K. But for example, you use this funds to buy another property. This then gets drawn up to $1.2 million. Then the interest charge on this will be around that. And therefore, you're still getting the $1,200 a week, and your repayment now is about $80,000, which is that times 12, but your income coming in is about 62 grand. So the net loss is 18 grand. You can use that to offset your tax payable that year. For example, you're on a high tax bracket and doing positive gearing actually makes you pay more tax. You're better off opting for option B, where you have the flexibility to control how much money that is being charged in terms of interest by adjusting how much money you put in your offset account to determine the level, whether you want to break even, adjust positive gearing or negative gearing is still within your grasp. That, ladies and gentlemen, will show you the pros and cons of whether, if you're in a situation, if you had $1 million to put down for a $1.5 million purchase, to either borrow minimum or the maximum. Hopefully this video allows you to make a more diplomatic choice between putting more money down or putting less money down with the pros and cons, rather than a knee-jerk reaction to your parents' age-old advice. Oh, don't get too much debt. That's bad. I can't tell you why, but it's bad. Don't do it. Jump in the comments. Let me know what you think.